Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I am Digby Ricci, and I'm presenting a series of lectures on enriching English. The focus of the first few lectures has been on Shakespeare, the genius of William Shakespeare, brushing up the bard. The first two lectures have concentrated on Shakespeare's great tragedy of love and power politics, Antony and Cleopatra, and this is the concluding lecture. In the last two acts of Antony and Cleopatra, Antony and Cleopatra themselves undoubtedly change as they move towards death. In a notorious passage, the great playwright and Shakespeare detractor, alas, George Bernard Shaw commented that in the conclusion of Antony and Cleopatra, Shakespeare uses all the resources of his rhetoric and stage pathos to give a sublimity to the wretched end of the two lovers and to suggest to foolish spectators that the world was well lost by the twain. If Shaw is correct, then Antony and Cleopatra is the tragedy of two pitiful, self-deceiving people, and its final message is a moralizing statement about the danger of sacrificing duty for sexual desire. Such a statement is obviously a grotesque oversimplification. In the final two acts of the play, Antony and Cleopatra do increase the grandeur of their relationship, and they also learn and develop as characters. In Act 5, Scene 2, Cleopatra herself spells it out when she says that her desolation begins to make a better life. And this is true of both of the lovers as they prepare for death. In Act 4, Antony is at his most moving with his comrades. He makes them onion-eyed when he calls upon them to serve him to the end, to remain loyal to him for another 2 hours. It might be the last duty that they perform. And his words here are an echo, a very interesting echo, of Christ's words to his disciples in the Garden of Gethsemane. I have referred to Christian allusions in Antony and Cleopatra previously, deliberately anachronistic allusions. And I'm not for one moment suggesting that Shakespeare is implying that the sensualist Mark Antony is like a self-sacrificing deity. However, Shakespeare is suggesting that there is a spiritual dimension to the love of Antony and Cleopatra, however fluctuating their emotions may be. That dimension must not be forgotten, and it is intensified in the final acts of the play. Suffering does ennoble the lovers. In defeat, they increase their splendor. And in a sense, after Antony's death, Cleopatra resurrects him, restores him to life through her glorious mythologizing language. He becomes a colossus whose delights were dolphin-like, lifting him above the ordinary world, and who scattered states as if they were mere coins or plates from his hands. Just before his botched suicide attempt, in Act 4, Scene 14, Antony delivers an extraordinary speech about cloud formations. He speaks of how the dark mists of the sky can form fortresses, dragons, bears, and promontories. And then, in an instant, these shapes dislimn, a wonderful verb, and dissolve into nothingness, becoming as indistinct as water is in water. Many commentators stress the fact that this is a very despairing speech, and that Antony is focusing on the point that his own visible shape can dislimn, dissolve as easily as mist in the sky. However, Antony is making a more profound philosophical point, because if shapes can be formed so easily in the sky and dislimn just as easily, then perhaps all earthly triumphs, all victories are as illusory and will disintegrate as quickly. In Act 4 and Act 5 of Antony and Cleopatra, both the lovers seem to be probing the meaning of existence far more. The earth itself becomes no more than a little O, and the triumphs even of the mightiest rulers might be nothing at all. Cleopatra is certainly aware of this when she says that Caesar's luck should be mocked. She refers to Octavius Caesar's victories as luck. Fortune is smiling on him at the moment, but it will not always do so. And her commitment, she feels, to a life beyond the victories, the power of the earth, will enable her to mock Octavius Caesar and to see him as an ass, an idiot, and a fool who placed far too much regard upon earthly success and achievement. David Bevington, whom I've already quoted previously, uses a wonderful phrase. He states that in their imaginative fertility, Antony and Cleopatra triumph over their Roman foes. And I think he is absolutely right to emphasize that point. Reality inflicts defeat and loss on Antony and Cleopatra, but in what could be called the battle of mythologies, the battle of narratives, they triumph, because their story ultimately is imposed upon the imagination of the world, the imagination of history. And so it is important for us to consider in more detail how the lovers change and develop as they move towards death. Shakespeare daringly still indicates that Antony is capable of blundering and even absurdity. At first, his suicide attempt is an almost comical disaster. However, as he does die in the arms of Cleopatra, that wonderful "I'm dying Egypt, dying," he becomes a man who is now committed to a life beyond that of earthly power. He uses mythological imagery to describe the lovers after death. They will be like Aeneas, the legendary founder of Rome in Virgil's great epic, and his tragic beloved Dido. But they will surpass Aeneas and Dido. They will be the center of all gazers in the afterlife, and they will make all the other shades, all other shadows, envious. Cleopatra's preparation for her death is even more magnificent. In fact, Shakespeare stresses that both lovers become more than human before they die by acknowledging fully every aspect of their humanity. And this is a paradox that you have to understand. Some students are troubled by the fact that Antony has that ludicrous failed suicide attempt just before he dies. But this is a reminder to us by Shakespeare that greatness in human beings remains human. There will always be elements of absurdity attached even to the most extraordinary figures. And Cleopatra, as she prepares for her death, acknowledges her link to the humblest, the meanest of human beings on earth. She says that she is no more than a woman, motivated by the same desires that motivate the milkmaid and the woman who does the meanest chores. Nowadays we would say chores, and it means a servant woman. At the same time, of course, she prepares for her death as an extraordinary queen of Egypt. She asks for her crown and her robes, her royal attire, and she is preparing to meet Mark Antony yet again. She unites the spiritual and the erotic in her language. She has immortal longings in her. She is both goddess figure, immortal, and woman filled with desire. She wants to be quickly present to get the first kiss from Antony, so he won't be tempted to give it to one of her ladies in waiting if they get there before her. She sees herself as more than the earth. All her faults are discarded. I am marble constant, she says, as constant as marble, as faithful. And the image of the moon, often used to describe her, she says, is no longer appropriate. The waxing and waning moon is no longer an appropriate metaphor for her. I am fire and air, she says, transcending the grossness of the earth. She is passion, fire, and spirituality, air, and the rest she will leave for baser life. So she sees herself as transcending the earth, but at the same time, she will have the most complete fulfillment of earthly passion, of sexual desire, with Antony after death, in the afterlife. As she places the asp to her bosom, she speaks of herself as if she is a nurse, a maternal figure suckling an infant. But this infant puts the nurse to sleep. Many people see this as a grotesque, an effectively grotesque and very macabre image. But one must look at the fact that Cleopatra is stressing here that death will come to her as a form of nourishment. The asp will let her slide into the sleep of death, and from it she will emerge, rejuvenated, to meet Mark Antony again. Just before she dies, she unites within herself every aspect of humanity. Her quest to live the incomparable life is fully achieved. She is ordinary woman, like a milkmaid or a servant. She is extraordinary queen, decked out in her robe and crown. She is like a mother figure, suckling herself in to rest. And she is also, she defiantly asserts, Antony's wife, the title that her Roman detractors insisted on denying her. She even unites within herself the Egyptian and the Roman. She is dying as the mighty ruler of Egypt, but she is dying, as she herself stresses, in the high Roman fashion. Her cunning and courage have ensured that she was not taken as a captive to Rome and paraded in Octavius Caesar's triumph. She has succeeded in tricking him. And it is interesting to note that historically, even Cleopatra's most critical detractors, her severest Roman critics, were overawed by her suicide. She escaped us, in a sense, they admitted, and she did so with splendor and dignity. So Cleopatra's death then turns her into a lass unparalleled. And that is the wonderful phrase, one of my favorite phrases in all Shakespeare, that is used of her. And it seems to be something of an oxymoron, doesn't it? Because a lass is simply a young woman, a girl. But unparalleled means incomparable. No comparison can be made. And in death, Cleopatra is exactly that. Both the adjective and the noun apply. She is woman, certainly, but at the same time, she is an unrivaled woman. Alas, unparalleled. The tribute is absolutely deserved. The mythical potency of the names of Antony and Cleopatra shall never fade. At this point, as I draw to my conclusion, it might be a good idea to examine Octavius Caesar in a little more historical detail. He was undoubtedly an astonishing man. It was said of him that he found Rome brick and left it marble, and his rise to power was extraordinary. Essentially, he was absolute ruler of Rome for 4 decades, while posing as the man who restored to Rome all the republican virtues and their republican form of government. As Tom Holland says, the classical historian, in his marvellous work of popular history, Rubicon, it is quite an achievement, actually, to pose as being one with the gods and simultaneously a defender of the rights of the people. And that Octavius Caesar managed to do very successfully indeed. This is the conclusion of my lectures on Antony and Cleopatra. But please do not feel for a moment that I regard them as definitive. It would be appallingly arrogant for any scholar to claim that when it comes to Shakespeare. You are, of course, welcome to disagree with any points that I make. You have every opportunity to express your own feelings and ideas about Antony and Cleopatra, but make sure that they are substantiated by quotations from this magnificent text. Thank you very much.